Hey, everybody. We've been talking about Congress and now the president. Now let's get into the federal bureaucracy. It's the other part of the executive branch we talk about. The part that is, I guess, not the president, but all little parts underneath the president that help make sure laws get enforced and regulations get done. So a bureaucracy is just a model of organization. It can be a lot of different, essentially a lot of levels of governance, essentially is what it is. Is various agencies that kind of work underneath different agencies, so on and so forth, all down the line. Typically, there's somebody who's in charge of that agency who responds to somebody else, and then there's deputies and secretaries and so on and so forth, all down the line. And so it can be really defined as all different agencies of the federal government. So it could be the EPA who checks out pollution, the IRS who do your taxes, the FDA that does meat, the CIA who spies on the Russians, the FBI who looks for murders, all that kind of stuff, okay? We want to know what kind of power influence it has and why it behaves the way it does and why it does the things it does in government, okay? And so bureaucracy has a few different things to it. Number one, it's a division of labor and specialization of function. Look at our little chart here, and I'll show some charts later on. Each of these organizations have a unique thing they're doing. So it's kind of specialized in exactly what they do. Typically, we recruit our employees and promote them based on their expertise and what they know and what they've done so far. There's these lines of authority and communication. We call it red tape, as you have to get one thing signed by another person, another person, another person. And it's kind of this red tape idea of like, if you want to do something, you have to have approved by all the people ahead of you too. There's going to be operations and SOPs, they're called, basically standard operating procedures that you run things by. And so every single thing has a form to it is what it's going to be. And we work in bureaucracy. I worked in the state bureaucracy for a short period of time. Every single thing you do has to be approved by somebody else, and you have to have 18,000 signatures. Every single thing has a certain form, and it really isn't very efficient. But the goal is to make it efficient and effective. It's really not most of the time because there's a lot of red tape involved of what people you got to talk to, what people you have to go to, and so on and so forth. Here's some of the things we have here. For example, there is fairness and responsiveness. So, like, what's more important, being fair or being responsible, taking care of situations? The IRS is a great example. The IRS is known to not be necessarily maybe the most responsible organization or fair organization for that matter, but they're going to take care of issues for you and make sure they happen. So what's more important, that they take care of the problems or they're fair to take care of the issues? You have efficiency versus effectiveness. Is the most cost-effective or the most successful way that happens? Sometimes the most successful methods are not the most cost-effective, right? You have to kind of balance how you're going to do that stuff. You have professional independence versus accountability. So do you want bureaucrats who work in this area to make their own decisions or demand accountability across the board? You must treat everybody the same or trust them to make their own decisions. And that's kind of where bureaucracy trade-offs end up happening here. So here's an example of our bureaucracy in general. We have our Constitution, again, our three branches, and the executive branch will branch off here into these 15 different departments, all headed by a secretary, right? So underneath the executive branch, you have things like OMB and the independent councils. We talk about Security Council and Joint Chiefs, all that kind of stuff that were in here. And then down here, we have all the different departments that are headed up by a secretary that's employed by the president. Here, if we take one area, say Secretary of State or a Department of State, which is right there, and let's break that one down a little bit, we'll have these different layers of government here. We have the Secretary of State, who we have different people for jobs, the Deputy Secretary of State, their executive secretaries, foreign assistant directors, so on and so forth. You have undersecretaries who do another level, and then you have officers that have directors at the level below that. And so each of these different people have different roles, that kind of stuff, and kind of working your way up the chain. If I'm in one of these organizations here, I have to report to my undersecretary first, and the deputy secretary, then eventually the secretary of the issues that are happening. And so there are different structures we have. We have cabinet agencies, which have a very broad mission. That'd be like your Department of State, if you will. A lot of times political focus, appointed by the president. That's a very visible job. So those cabinet ones are these 15 ones right here. So agriculture, commerce, defense, education, and energy, so on and so forth. We'll do an activity with those to learn more about those a little later on. You have independent agencies that are smaller and have a more focused mission, okay? The president appoints leadership and it's stood for by the Senate, but not necessarily the cabinet. So it's not like super political that way, okay? These are jobs kind of like head of NASA, the CDC, all those kind of things are kind of fall independent organizations that, aren't necessarily like a cabinet type thing that gets super political. You have regulatory commissions who have special jobs like economic areas or other regulations. So these are more like outside political control because they're basically regulating TV, news, media, energy, etc., and making sure those things happen. So here's the FCC, for example. They have different kind of control system than we have in a cabinet position. So why do we need these? Why are these a very powerful positions to have? Number one is that they're very essential, right? The public needs the work done by. If the Social Security Administration doesn't do their job, people don't get their checks. If the IRS doesn't collect taxes, we have no money. If the uh, FAA doesn't have air traffic controllers, planes crash. That kind of situation. They also have knowledge and expertise that we don't have. They have special. I have no idea how to inspect meat, but the FDA does, and so they have a certain set of very special skills, if you will, to quote Liam Neeson, that we don't have, and they're going to use those skills to make sure that things are good. They also have discretion, so they have legislation that they have to follow. Okay. And essentially, they give agencies the ability to determine how to implement it. So Congress may tell them to do something, and then they can decide how far to make that happen. So, like, essentially, Congress gives permission to the FCC to regulate what's said on TV, and then FCC can decide what's going to happen with that, what kind of naughty words you can say, and so on and so forth. They also focus on certain clientele. So, like, certain people who need certain help with things, they'll help them out. And so, for example, farmers in Department of Agriculture. Agriculture will help farmers with research, with stimulus funds, with whatever it might be they need to help them out. Housing, urban development, help cities provide housing for people who are poor, homeless, etc. And they'll focus on certain little pieces of it, of the country and certain clientele. Now, a lot of agencies are involved. We call agencies bureaucrats usually because they work in a bureaucracy. And that's people who work in this whole system here. And so you have people who are careerists who work in this for a long period of time. I knew careerists when I worked in the state government. And they work for a single agency their entire life. When I worked for the DNR, there are people in my office who would work there for years and knew every single little thing. And so they, have this reliability, stability, and they know how to run this thing, like nobody's business, okay? But they also have to follow that right procedure or else they're punished. And it's kind of those things that way. We have our politicians, people who work in it for a little bit of time in an office and then move out. Like they kind of get in there, get experience in government, and they want to kind of benefit themselves and people put on their resume and then run for something later on or run for a different position later on. They're kind of in the middle of the structure, and they may be destabilization because they may change things and bug out, that kind of situation. So they're trying to find a way to utilize government jobs, get into something better, whether it be politics or a private gig, whatever it might be. They're trying to use politics as that stepping stone. You have your professionals who essentially get like all the other standard stuff from outside, attorneys, academics, etc., and then get involved in an agency later on. And so then they may be like a special position within that. So when I worked for the DNR, right, you had your biologists and your wardens, all kinds of have their own kind of places in those areas. And so certain things you got to have that in that profession that are pertain directly to that area of the bureaucracy. And so they have the agency goals and they have their professional goals and make sure they line up together. So I knew the wildlife biologists and that kind of stuff, for example, who were trying to do the deer herd and the bear herd and all that kind of stuff. And they were trying to work with their own knowledge of stuff, plus with the government to figure out how the hunting laws worked, all those kind of things, and kind of clashed once in a while. So we have what's called the civil service today. And so civil service is a group of employees that work for the government, including the armed forces, perform a lot of administrative work. And so essentially your government employees, where it comes down to doing the work to everyday kind of things to make sure government runs correctly. It used to be that you got these jobs by knowing people. At times it still is today. Basically, friends got jobs for supporters, all that kind of stuff. If I gave a lot of money to a presidential candidate, they hooked me up with a job, and it was pretty sweet. That changed in 1883 with the Pendleton Act. You have to take a test now to prove you have some kind of knowledge base to do that. Even in the state of Wisconsin now, you have to have now a certain, you have to take a test to get a full-time job with the government. I was a part-time employee with the DNR, and so I didn't have to have that test done. But when I applied both the DNR and I applied a couple of years ago, I applied recently for a job with the Historical Society. I had to take a test. The first step in the process to get the job was to actually take an exam and prove you have knowledge for the exam to be in that position. So essentially, a lot of states and the federal government make you take an exam now that proves your knowledge and proves your skill, so that you're not being like you're just kind of being given a job with a sweet salary. That's kind of what it comes down to being. So Civil Service Day is under the Office of Personnel Management. It's the central thing for recruiting, examining, hiring, firing, all that kind of stuff for the federal government. Every state has their own as well. It's Department of Administration here in the state of Wisconsin. There's a merit system that's in there, kind of like to enforce the merit principle that you should earn your job, not just be given your job, but earn your job. And Congress sets the pay and conditions for people, except for postal employees. Postal employees do their own thing because post office is slightly different, okay? Whole other story. But Congress kind of decides what pay is going to happen for each area, that kind of thing. You kind of see who works different jobs here. You have white-collar jobs, blue-collar jobs. Typically, there's a lot of jobs are not degree-type jobs. More men work in it. Typically, a lot of white people working in these jobs, but their job is still trying to figure out where it goes. Post office is not included in this because post office, well, a federally supported job is actually a independent agency that's supported by the government, so it's not the same kind of thing. Here's a little intro to bureaucracy. We're going to talk more about what bureaucracy does and how they do it in class. We're going to do a couple activities with a few different examples of restaurants, that kind of stuff, and you guys are going to be bureaucracy, try to make things happen. Thanks a lot, everybody. You guys are awesome. Thank you for your time and attention.